don't sometimes feel like redeemed the way I hear people the way they talk about it. Until you brought this up, I again did not make this connection. So I'm just being honest, like Lori and I sometimes don't always get these big, deeper connections. The land will fight back as the people are not following God. That's all part I thought was interesting. Again, I was not aware of this. Hey girls, it's Michelle.
And Lori.
And sorry if we look awkward. I'm in a lower chair and Lori's got a dog behind her, so we're just a mess over here. Here we are filming Ruth. It was a short book.
I feel so tall.
Okay, so like I said, we are talking about Ruth. We are working our way through the Bible for the second time and sharing our journey. We just got done sharing you guys our Judges video, so make sure you check that out.
Yes.
But this channel, we're here to not only share our journey of reading the Bible again and what we're learning because we came out of false teachings, but also to help you have a life too, that you're truly seeking God in all parts of your life.
We're girls who kind of separated God out from things, but now as we learn, no, he can be a part of everything and he wants to be a part of everything. And so we try to show that here. It's a mix of everything and
all parts of our
us
lives.
Just trying our best to hear God and to follow his ways and to live for the Lord. We hope you stay and follow along with our journey.
Let's get into our Ruth Bible talk. It's a short book. It was only 4 chapters, so Laura and I read one chapter a night to really kind of go slow and sit with it. I noticed that for me, a theme in Ruth, besides that we saw that this was taking, obviously how the book starts, cueing us in, Judges. So if you haven't seen our Judges video, make sure you check that one out. This story is in the middle of what's happening in Judges. So
I find, for me personally, when I really sat with it after reading it, that really just was beautiful to me.
That's what I was going to get to.
God gave us this too.
Yeah, because when I was first reading through it, I'm like, that's just, why sharing this story? I know Ruth's part of David's line, therefore leading to the Messiah, so that's something I'm tracking. So of course I was like, okay, that's something I'm tracking. I'm writing that down, the seed. But I'm also like, why else this story?
Yeah.
The biggest thing that once you sit with the Judges, and then what here, not only first how it starts, we have Ruth, who's not an Israelite, leave her gods to come to the one true God, and she listens and obeys Naomi and respects her, wants to take care of her. Like, that's godly principles.
And like Naomi through all this and Ruth are getting redeemed out of it. Like these are just huge to me, biblical, high level themes woven throughout. And this short little cute book of Ruth like sums it up so nicely. I just wrote, kind of picking back off what Michelle just said, I just wrote, Ruth is a great picture of how so many of us are foreigners to Israel. We are coming out of our father's houses or our pagan ways.
Or our gods.
Right. And hear of Yahweh, our true creator, and we cling to him and he welcomes us, just like Naomi welcomed Ruth along her journey, and how Boaz welcomed Ruth as well. So foreigners, yet welcome. So to me, like another bigger picture theme of the Bible is that we as Gentiles, we are grafted into God's family. And so that's something that really touched my heart and my eyes picked up on and sat with. Some themes I'm tracking is water. Water was mentioned in chapter 2. It says, if you are, at verse 9, if you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the young men draw. That was it. I think pretty sure for all my water, there wasn't too much else. So I didn't really have too much aha moments in that my water tracking thing to add into that. Besides, also you can see water brings life, renewal, and all that stuff from that. The other thing I was tracking was righteousness, and I don't know if it was actually used, at least in my translation.
I don't recall seeing it. You can see righteousness acts though
through the people in the story,
the way
and
they're
one
acting.
being, I know a lot of people refer to as Boaz as a righteous man. So I was just sitting with that. Okay,
didn't it say noble character or something? It's said about
somewhere,
him.
And so I was just kind of sitting with that. I'm trying to really sit with and understand a bigger picture and deeper righteousness and see it played out in the Bible. So here you can see maybe because he provides for Ruth, he doesn't like shun her away. He works with her. He sees how deeply he cares for Naomi, and so he has compassion on her. The other thing I made note about Boaz is that he knew the way of the Lord. He knew the way things worked, and he respected it, and he lived it out. So righteousness, integrity, compassion, generous, and noble. Kind of sitting with that too. And we already talked about how Ruth, was a Gentile, yet God works with her.
Yeah.
Because she what? Another theme, Michelle, and I think we've hinted on a couple chapters before, is another theme that we've really sat with is, which God are you following? You're going to follow Yahweh, the true God.
And also just piggyback off what we said at the beginning about this is taking the place of Judges, where we saw people were doing what they wanted to do, evil in the sight of the Lord, and here's this beautiful story of people being faithful. And then just, of course, how the book ends. is kind of the whole point also of this story too, is that it's leading into David and then leading to Jesus, the Messiah.
I definitely felt hope as I was reading through the book of Ruth. After reading the book of Judges, it gave me hope, as Michelle said, like seeing somebody. And this is what happens when you're faithful. Even though the people around you are not being faithful, you can still choose to be faithful to Yahweh.
But I also feel like seeing Boaz knew God's ways and followed it, was faithful to also. It also goes to show following God's ways, you are taken care of. Trust in his ways. Trust that he said this to do this for this. Do it and follow it. And so I just like sitting with that too. Yeah. Like this is also showing coming out of Judges where people weren't satisfied with what God did for them. And here is Ruth and Naomi getting taken care of after losing everything. And by the end they're restored. They're redeemed back. They followed God's ways. They were obedient. And Boaz, of course, was the obedient one as well. Yeah. So redemption is something lately in my own personal walk with the Lord and my prayers. Redemption is an area, I see people always throw that out. But to be honest, I was like, what really does it mean? Because I'd always be like, I don't sometimes feel like redeemed the way I hear people the way they talk about it. When I look at my past, and yes, I feel like a new person because obviously I'm talking about Jesus more than I ever had in my life, and he's definitely changed other desires and Lori and I's worldview and viewpoint on the world. I guess that word redemption, I was like, redeemed. I always struggled with like, what really does that mean? And Bible Project, I check in on the work every once in a while. They produce a lot of great content and I love it, and always seems to speak to me when I need it. And they were doing a whole series lately on redemption, and I've watched one about, I think it was titled What is Redemption? I forget the title. But then I was just through this seeing redemption was repeated a lot throughout this book. Redeemer. It reminded me of that, so I went back to their podcast, and I believe it was called, in the title, I think it had Ruth and Naomi, or did it have the book? I forget what it was, but it titled Redemption with these characters. I'm like, okay, I got to listen to this. And so I'm going to share some things. So I highly recommend. I didn't write down everything, so I'm just going to share some things that really stuck out to me. So please go check out that podcast as well, because and they have, like I said, a whole more series, which I plan to go back and re-listen and really sit with it all. So things that I've learned about redemption in a nutshell. Tim was saying redemption is to transfer back into rightful possession, taking back what's fully yours. This is a big theme in the Bible. God redeemed humans from death, as we are meant to have life with him. That goes starting back in the garden, right? And the whole story and what Jesus did on the cross, he saved us from death. That's redemption. And tying into all the God's talk, Lori and I have more of a Michael Heiser kind of point of view, is that we feel they were God's governing, ruling over these other nations. And when Jesus came back, that's why there was no longer Jew or Gentile thing, meaning everyone's welcome back into the family of God through Jesus. Come back into the family of God, like Ruth did in this story. She chose to leave her gods and give her faithful allegiance to Yahweh. And so that's kind of what redemption also means, is like, and we see that also with their story. Naomi lost everything. Same with Ruth when her husband died. And that time for a widow and stuff was hard. But by the end, we see they're fully restored. And Naomi gets a son through Ruth again. And they're getting taken care of, like, so fully restored. So I just love sitting with that. They got back what was rightfully theirs, life. But a sort of exchange needs to happen, he was saying with this. And then in chapter 2, verse 20 here, and Ruth, Goel, if I'm saying that, and I forget how he said it, Goel in Hebrew, that's when it says he's the family redeemer.
Kinsman, mine says kinsman redeemers.
Okay, it's my translation says, where would I say, verse 20? It says family redeemer, and I guess that redeemer is the Goel in Hebrew. So redeeming something, exchanging value, repossessing something on behalf of a family member. Remember, this is during a time of famine, during the time of Judges, and this family first had to leave to go to Moab area because of that, because of what was happening. So they were exiled, living in exile, and the father dies, the sons marry Moabite, and they die. So just, things aren't looking good. So remember that in the background. That's kind of how the story that the writer wanted us to start off with, knowing those details. So again, the famine's going on in Ruth in the days of the Judges. I love how Tim said this, so that immediately should bring us back also to Torah, the curses, the land. And it says in the Torah, I didn't write down where exactly this is. It might have been in Deuteronomy. The land will fight back as the people are not following God. And it goes back to even we talked about in our Judges video, God was done saving his people, and he even told them all these things, famine, pestilence, all this stuff will come upon you, and we see it happening because they're not following his way. So that's part of the curses. So that's playing out. So the Moabites in the biblical story descend from Abraham's nephew Lot, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that.
That is an interesting detail to sit with.
Naomi loses her family, the family inheritance in the land, and at the end she gets a new son, a family land back. So like I said, she got back what she lost. Ruth giving an oath to Naomi and God is surprised because she's an outsider and she trusts in the God of Israel more than the insiders do. Barley harvest, and I loved, my Bible made note of that too, that the barley harvest, and even had like a map of the different times of years for the Jewish festivals and their months and things. So I love sitting with that because that means around Passover, which what's Passover about? The people being redeemed, right?
And saved, yeah.
Yeah, and what Jesus further does for us, he's our Passover lamb. So I love that tie into it as well. Also back in chapter 2 with Boaz, he's acting generous to her as is in the law. Like I said, Lloyd was saying earlier, like he knew, he was aware of God's law and was following them. And we see it, he's acting out. He let her, because remember, I think
the widows are allowed, or the foreigners are allowed to pick something.
And also God told his people, you don't pick everything, so there's some left over for people to come in. So we see that kind of acting out here as well. And also it links to Abraham. I love how Tim Mackey brought this up as well. She is being compared to Abraham. And I love that. I think it was verse 11. It says this, part of it says, how you left your father and mother and your native land, and how you came to a people you didn't previously know. And I loved how he said that we should link you back to Abraham. He left his family. Yeah. He left his land to go into a land he didn't know.
He left those gods and followed Yahweh.
Yeah, so I just love that connection. I did not make that connection when I first read through it. Tim brought that to my attention. So I'm sharing with you because I thought it was really good to know. So again, like I said, leave your land, leave your family, a non-Israelite who's become the right, faithful image of Israel's ancestors. Something else you guys know, Will and I also going through our Matthew again and updating it, and that's also a lot of Matthew's theme is showing that the outsiders are getting it and coming in versus the insiders who should know. And we look at Judges, so this is a great comparison story. Bigger picture of God redeeming the whole world back under his control. So Ruth came to seek refuge under the wings of Yahweh. That's in chapter 3, verse 9. This whole part I thought was interesting. Again, I was not aware of this, and I didn't really make note of this. Again, Tim Mackey brought this to my attention as I was listening to that podcast. So he said, I forget the phrase he used for that word, but we see that later on when Ruth asked him to step into the role as the redeemer. Yeah. And verse 9, he asked, who are you? She says, I'm Ruth, your servant. She replied, take me under your wing, for you are a family redeemer. And I guess that take you under the wing is referring to under the wings of Yahweh. She came to seek refuge under the wings of Yahweh. And I'll get more to that in a second. So just bear with me. This builds. So she's, like we said, she's marrying Abraham's trust and loyalty to God. We see God restoring goodness in a suffering person's life. And now entering to chapter 3, when Naomi tells Ruth to go sit at Boaz's feet at the end of the harvest, that's like an abundance party. Tim was saying, like men are celebrating the abundance coming in. So this is language. I liked how you brought this up. I again did not make this connection. So I'm just being honest. Like Laura and I sometimes don't always get these big, deeper connections. Again, we're still kind of new to. This is our second time reading through the Bible.
Well, I feel like that's to me just the more significance of
community,
sharing what you're learning with others, because you might pick up on something that someone didn't.
Agreed. So he said this language is from Judah and the Tamar story back in Genesis 38.
Oh, wow.
Tamar and a non-Israelite, and Judah was, I didn't go back and reread the story, but I believe 2 of his sons died. Judah tells Tamar to go back to her father and mother's house. Tamar does, but she feels wronged, and she acts in a way to save this family. So this story is intentional. What is going to happen? So Tim's like, so people probably had that story in the background, like, we know how that story came out. What's going to happen in this story? So Ruth is asking him to step into the role as the family redeemer. So in a way, she's saying, can you marry me and buy my family land? Keep the family line. And that's what Tamar was trying to do, right? Both Boaz and Ruth are people of good character. And the author made notes of that in the story.
Definitely see that, yes.
We also see that Boaz was wealthy and mighty. He was also known for that in the area. So Boaz is the vehicle of redeeming Naomi and Ruth in the family land from slavery, poverty, and destitution. Boaz becomes an image of Yahweh, spreading here's the word, kanaf over Ruth, and that ties into under the wings of Yahweh, that I said earlier. So spreading his kanaf over Ruth, and Ruth has taken refuge under that kanaf of Yahweh. So Naomi didn't think God cared about her. You can see that she felt bitter. She even changed her name.
Yeah.
Like she just felt like God didn't like her. But here we see he was still at work. And I just like sitting with that. Like, I think all of us probably have a moment in our lives where we feel like God's mad at us for something's happening in our life. But again, we don't always see all that he is doing. And then in chapter 4, the blessing is focused, I told you, is how this book ends is the seed. How it just ends. That's like the focus, right? Is the seed, the restoration of life.
I think, again, that's setting up the hope and finish the story. Like, what's going to happen next in the story.
And Lord, I know in the Jewish mindset, genealogies mean everything. And I like how reason why I was tracking this, because the beginning, the seed of the woman already is unusual about the seed. So that's also why I was tracking. And here we see it continued here, even the mention of David.
Yes.
And that's also, we talked about in the Judges video, this is leading to the next era of the people with the kings ruling. And David is their greatest king. So we see the blessing focus on the seed and the restoration of life. And we see God's mercy and forgiveness is in the Bible. This is a theme of redemption. In this story, you can see God is merciful. He cares. He is generous. But also, like we said at the beginning, it's for his people to be faithful, to listen to him, to follow his ways. Bigger story, this little side note of redemption. I hope that helped you understand more of redemption through this story. I feel like it was a great example for me to help understand that. Again, I'm not, like I would say, 100% fully there in relation to my own story, but I can see it when I can hear people explain it this way. I'm like, oh yeah, I understand. But like I said, it's something I'm personally still working on with Jesus' redemption in my life. So anyways.
Another thing that I found Michelle and I are trying to get better at is always looking for patterns and the chiasms throughout the biblical story, because I know that's how they wrote a lot back then. It was very
I'm not good at
well known. And so I still sometimes have to go to sources, because I see sometimes the repetitive thing. I'm like, okay, but am I missing something?
Yeah,
so
same.
I always like to back up. But anyway, I came across one chiasm I thought was pretty interesting, so I'll share it out. It's an A, B, C, D, C, B, A type of chiasm. A is chapter 1, 1 through 5.
Is it for the whole book? Is that chiasm?
Yeah, it's the whole book.
Okay.
Sorry, the whole book of Ruth is chiasm. A is the sum of chapter 1 about you seeing that the home is empty, there's no future, but that the A at the bottom of the chiasm, how 4 ends, the home is being filled. They had a kid, so the home is being filled now, and there's a great future ahead of them.
You can also tie it into that there was a famine, and then he's got abundance of barley out here in this story.
That too. B is at the end of chapter 1. It's back to Jerusalem, you see. So then you see one girl leave, so the Orpha goes, but one person, Ruth, is committed. The other B, at the start of chapter 4, you see that they're being taken care of in Bethlehem. Who's gone now? It's the other kinsmen leave, and it is just Boaz who commits.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and then C, as the start of chapter 2, is all about the harvest field. Ruth leaves Naomi, Ruth requests, Boaz responds, and then there's rest for Naomi and Ruth. And then the other C is chapter 3, and it's also about the harvest field, and you see Ruth leaves Naomi, there's Ruth's proposal, Boaz response, and then Ruth and Naomi interact again together. And then the D, which is the middle of the chiasm, is chapter 2, verses 18 all the way to chapter 3 through the first 5 verses, I believe. And it's all about the interaction. And so here,
chapter 2,
verse 18, all the way into chapter 3, I believe, up to verse 5. I wrote it 1-5, so I don't know if that means verses 1 through 5 or I meant to write 15. So, but it's all about the interaction, and it's about present blessing by God and Boaz, and then there's a future blessing by God through Boaz. Again, so just about the present blessing, and then there's also going to be a future blessing. So I think, again, looking at the bigger picture and some of the key themes that Michelle kind of picked up on, redemption, following Yahweh, having your loyalty to Yahweh. Anyway, so I really enjoyed reading Ruth. It was a fun and delightful little story to read.
Yeah, as always said, it definitely leaves hope to see that there are people who truly still seek God and want to follow his ways. Yeah. I also like sitting with that. My Bible reminded me that Boaz and her doing this just like ordinary work, working in the field, and you still see God working. And I know a lot of us sometimes don't feel the work we do or the little things we do matters in God's kingdom. But Lori and I know learning with a lot of people we listen to, every moment is a chance for you to bring kingdom, to bring God's kingdom into that, wherever you are at, how you're interacting with someone, how you're treating someone, and things like that. So just a great reminder that all of us at every moment of life can be compassionate, generous, and truly seek God in that moment.
So next week, be getting into 1st and 2nd Samuel. So give this video a like if you liked hearing our thoughts on the book of Ruth, and if you're enjoying reading your Bible as well. We pray that we are an inspiration for you, that we're just two ordinary girls who love Jesus and want to understand God's word better, so we're diving in and trying to figure it out ourselves. Some things we get, some things we don't, but we hope that we can show you that you can do it too, and that we're in here to do it all together. So.
Yes. All right, see you in the next one.